So, I built my own Stanley Cup, but let's go back really quick before the finished product here. I was inspired by seeing this homemade Stanley Cup a while back. Now, this was almost exactly and beautiful, and clearly they have a lot of experience working with metal, and as you'll see with my end product, I don't have a lot of experience building things, so let's get that out of the way first. I'm sure a lot of you could do a better job than I did. So, before I go down what exactly I did to make this Stanley Cup, I want to specify my goal going into this was to spend the as least amount of money as I could. And you'll find out that I ended up spending a lot of money, but I still wanted to cut back a little bit. So I'll go by piece. Let's start off with the first thing ever. Let's start off with the bowl. Now, to me, this was the most important part of the project because I think the bowl is the most iconic part of the Stanley Cup. And I couldn't really figure out how to make one my own, so I got one 3D printed. Now, unfortunately, in my emails, I cannot find the exact company I used, but I will say this was the most expensive piece by far. It definitely eclipsed the $250 mark with shipping, so I'll peg it around $260. It could have been more, I'm honestly not sure, but if you want to bypass this and make it super cheap, I'm sure you can find metal bowls at Target, Walmart, anywhere really, with the rough size. What you're going to want to find is something that is about 11 and a half inches wide and about 7 inches tall. That's about the rough dimensions of the bowl. But as you can see here, I wanted to get something as close to it as possible. Unfortunately, when I bought it, I didn't see that wasn't the exact Stanley Cup design, which is unfortunate, but I can always upgrade this feature in the future if I wanted to. So the next things that are pretty simple, you can find these really at any thrift store you go to. There's going to be a lot of cookie tins lying around, and I think this is a really good base for the tiers that come after the bowl. And I think cookie tins are super cheap. I got them at my thrift store for 25 cents each, and I bought a whole bunch to test out different sizes. So you can do this. My finished product of the Stanley Cup ended up being a cookie tin in the middle, but the top one and the bottom bowl ended up being a 6-inch wide cake pan, and then the bottom one is a 9-inch wide cake pan. So those filled out really great. And in between the first tier and the second tier, you'll see a little serving dish, and I got that from like a restaurant website store for restaurants to buy cheap pots and pans for their needs. So I will link that in the description if you wanted to go this exact route. And underneath the third tier is a serving tray that I found at a local garage sale. So a lot of this is really a found object thing. So it can really take you a long time if you want to go really cheap and just trying to find things, or you can simplify it and find things yourself online or going to stores, Target, Walmart, whatever it is. So I was really lucky to find this one because it really fit perfectly the dimensions I was looking for. So the next part of the project was the stock pot. Now this was an infamous part of the project with a lot of my followers on Twitter because it had handles that I really never removed because I didn't know how to do it cleanly. I eventually did, and they are finally off, but you will still see that there is some little holes that are protruding a tiny bit and filled up with a little bit of Bondo, not done very well. But I wanted to make sure everything was done by myself and by hand, so I wanted to make it my own little custom thing to be proud of. But basically the stock pot, 14 inches wide, bought from that restaurant store I was talking about, and underneath that is a cake pan, which is also 14 inches wide. This is about an inch less than I think the real cup is, just guesstimating because I couldn't find anything online that was official. Now, the tough part of this was how do I connect these two, because as you can see, the stock pot has an opening. So what I did was I made like a cross of wood panels and then used some very strong adhesive to keep the wood in place to drill the cake pan into it at the bottom, just to give it more space to be glued on and to have a stronger bond to the actual stock pot. And the last piece, also bought at that restaurant store, is a 16-inch cake pan that goes underneath it all, and obviously spray painted black to fit that. And to connect that to the cake pan at the bottom, I did the same thing as I did with the stock pot. I did a wooden cross, and glued it to the edge of the cake pan so I could drill the pizza pan in right underneath it to have a strong hold. So let's go into putting it all together. Now, around the stock pot and around the cake pan, you will see that I do have some type of rings around this. Now, luckily I found a video about a few days before I went through with cutting wire around this. This is actually car trim, and it works almost exactly like tape. There's an adhesive strip that you just pull off, and then you just slowly and surely wrap it around the stock pot. And this, I think, gives it a very nice look, and almost looks exactly like the rings do on the real Stanley Cup. And they're chrome too, so if you're making sure every piece is metal, you might not have to spray paint it like I did, but on my cup, a lot of the things had different colors and textures from each other, so I figured to make everything the same finish and look like one piece, I wanted to go through with spray painting it. So, obviously, to get a metallic look on spray paint, it's pretty tough, but I was lucky to find this one video on YouTube that goes over really detailed chrome spray painting. Now, a lot of people were telling me to get car painting or, go to someone professional to do this, but again, I wanted to keep the cost down as that would be a lot of money, and I wanted to do it myself. So I found a great video on YouTube. I'll try to link it if I find it, but basically you use high gloss black spray paint first as a primer. Then, with light coats, go over it with specifically Spaz Sticks Mirachrome spray paint. It's a bit more expensive than your typical spray paint, but I promise if you go through with light coats and take your time, it comes out pretty damn well, and you have a really nice shine from the cup. Now, unfortunately, it's not going to be a real metallic shine, reflective shine, but honestly, for a spray paint job, I'm pretty proud of it. Now, once you're ready to put it all together, you'll have a base of a Stanley Cup. And obviously I haven't talked about the engraving yet. I used a Dremel tool. Basically what I did is I pasted over with paper from a printout the names and how I wanted them to be laid out, and I just did a Dremel tool right over each letter very slowly and carefully, and that's how I did my engraving. So let's talk about how I set up my engraving. The first tier is dedicated to the junior hockey teams that won it when it was called the Dominion Hockey Challenge Cup. You can find the Challenge Cup engraving on the actual Stanley Cup on the actual bowl, but since mine is plastic, I can't Dremel tool on that or else it'll crack everywhere. So that's what the first tier is based off of. Second tier is for all the professional hockey teams that won the Stanley Cup. This was before it was dedicated to the NHL, so it's from a whole bunch of different leagues and teams you may have never even heard of. And you can see my awful gluing steel skills, and if you're offended by that, I truly am sorry. The third tier is all the NHL teams that won it after it was dedicated to the NHL. So you'll find a lot of the original 6 teams here, and all the teams that won it up until 2005. Now, the reason I started the rings at 2005 on the stock pot is because that's when I actually started to watch and follow hockey more in depth. And I've done it all the way up to last year's champion, St. Louis, and I'll be able to continue this tradition for the next 36 years if I don't upgrade any pieces until then. So that's basically how I went about this journey. It was long to figure out all the bits and pieces I needed, and I'm sure a bunch of you can do a much better job than I did. If any of you have any questions, you can reach me out on Twitter or on my YouTube channel here. If you want to send me your ideas to make this better, that's awesome as well. Anything to upgrade my Stanley Cup will be appreciated. And if any of you follow this and put together a design of your own, send it to me, because the more homemade Stanley Cups, the better I feel. Because while tinfoil cups are great, having one and lifting up one like this is just incredible. So if you watched it all the way through, I really appreciate it. And leave a comment below if you're going to go about doing this, or if you have any suggestions for me, or if you just want to talk hockey, let me know. Thanks, guys.